Good morning. On behalf of the Wentworth Watershed Association Board of Directors, members, staff, partner organizations, underwriters, and sponsors, we welcome you to our 6th annual Water Summit. I'm Julie Brown, the Executive Director for the Wentworth Watershed Association, and we're so glad you're here. Your presence today shows your commitment to protecting surface waters in Wolfboro and beyond. The beauty of the lakes and lands in Wolfboro and Greater Lakes region is why we all live here. Our quality of life and economic prosperity depend on clean water and forested lands. As you may have heard, an alert for cyanobacteria bloom was issued by DES for Lake Wentworth yesterday afternoon. I will share more information about this alert and findings from last year's bloom during the second half of the summit, but it further solidifies why we need to take action now. Alerts like the one we are receiving right now lead to lost recreation days on the lake and impact your summer. Cyanobacteria are fed by nutrients entering the lakes from roads, shorelines that are eroding, stormwater carrying sand from winter salt and sand applications, dirt from camp or roads or driveways, fertilized lawns, pet waste, and failed septic systems leading into surface waters. We need to prevent these nutrients from reaching the surface waters, which is what we're going to talk about today. Today's summit is focused on the importance of shoreline and watershed protection. You will learn about the outcomes from the State Cyanobacteria Advisory Committee, including action plans to address cyanobacteria. You and all of your neighbors are major players in the action plans. You will be called upon to act and implement projects on your property to protect shoreline and infiltrate stormwater. No matter where you live in the watershed, there are things you can do to help protect the streams and lakes in Wolfboro. During the break, you'll have an opportunity to meet each other, visit local lake association tables, get resources, sign up for lake-minded property visits, a landscaping workshop that's coming up, and of course, volunteer. We're all nonprofit organizations and we rely on your volunteerism. If you're currently a volunteer for a lake association, will you please raise your hand? Excellent, look around. It takes all of us. After the break, you'll hear from representatives from each lake association in town who will update you on their stormwater management actions, about water quality in the lake they represent, any cyanobacteria updates, and learn about how you can help. You will also have an opportunity to ask all of our presenters questions in a panel. Thank you for being here. We're thrilled you're spending a morning with us and are interested in lake health. I now pass you to Don Kretschmer. I'm pointing in the wrong direction. There he is. To Don Kretschmer, who has served as our summit moderator for 5 years. Don has dedicated his career to protecting lakes throughout New England and probably beyond. We are incredibly grateful for his service as moderator and especially for his leadership in the state and the town as a limnologist. That's somebody who studies lakes. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Julie. Welcome, everybody. I was kind of hopeful seeing the forecast earlier in the week that this was going to be kind of a rainy day and everyone wouldn't be missing anything, so that's not true. But thanks so much for coming out on a nice day and joining us and kind of learning a little bit more about our resources here and how we might protect them and what we can do as individuals. So this is Water Summit number 6. We've covered a lot of ground in the various water summits that we've had up to now. We started off, the first one was kind of local water quality issues, climate change. At the second one, we talked about watershed solutions on both public and private land. The third one, we talked about cyanobacteria. That seems to be a recurring theme. We're going to continue to talk about that. We're going to talk about that a little bit more today. At number 4, we talked about some statewide initiatives to help us with some of our runoff issues and some gravel road issues. Last year, we talked about watershed management and the importance of planning and we did an in-depth look into septic systems and followed up with some workshops. This year, kind of our theme is shoreline protection for water quality. And this is sort of, it brings it all back to kind of what the individual can do who lives near or on our water front to protect water quality. And I guarantee, and I've said this a number of times before, there is something that each of us can do on our property. Even if we think our property is in really good shape, there is something more that we can do. And it might just be a little thing, but the culmination of, the sum total of all these little things ends up being a pretty big thing. So I would encourage all of you to look for things that you can do on your own property to make it better. And I thought, before we get started on, our keynote speaker, I thought I would start off with a quote that I think kind of encapsulates sort of the theme of this conference, and it's by Luna Leopold, who was a hydrologist with the federal government years ago. He passed away back in around 1990, I think. And this is a quote from 50 years ago, but it's still absolutely relevant today. And it goes, "Water is the most critical resource issue of our lifetime and our children's lifetime. The health of our waters is the principal measure of how we live on the land. The health of a community's water really is an excellent measure of a community's success." And if that doesn't encapsulate sort of Wolfborough's challenges and Wolfborough's pride, nothing does. Again, this was 50 years ago, but this is exactly what Wolfboro is all about. Wolfboro is about our water resources. And, protection of our water resources is a direct reflection of sort of how well our community has done in the past and how well we'll do in the future. And so I thought that was, something that would really kind of resonate here. So our keynote speaker today is Dave Niels. He's the Chief Aquatic Biologist at New Hampshire DES. He's worked for 24 years. He has a bachelor's degree from Cornell, a master's from Virginia Tech. He's also a part-time resident in the Lake Wentworth Watershed, where he enjoys spending time on the lake. Dave has been a colleague. He's also been somebody I've worked with closely, and he's been a friend for the past 25 years, and I'm really proud to have him, here talking to you today. We'll have some time for questions after Dave gets done. And if you have questions, there are note cards to pass forward for Dave or anybody else. We'll be able to pick those up in the second half as well. But feel free to ask questions. We'll sort them out. We'll get to as many as we possibly can. Thanks.
Morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. I'm just going to slide this back because I have to look at my slides here, so give me just a minute. There we go. I think that'll work. Can you guys hear me okay? We're just waiting for my presentation to load up. So while we're waiting for that, just want to start with, thank you all for attending this morning, and obviously you care deeply about surface waters around the state of New Hampshire. In particular, whatever surface water is your favorite, the one you spend the most time on. But think about all the people that aren't here today, that live, next to you, your neighbors or around you. So I encourage you to take the information that you learned here today, you get here today, the relationships you make, and bring those back to your neighbors and try to transfer that information, because it's not just you. We all know that you guys care deeply, but we need to really get this information out to the larger community and get them to start doing things as well. All right. I'm in charge of this, right, Axel? All right, Axel's my man up behind me. So, all right, so my name is David Niels. Again, I'm the Chief Aquatic Biologist at DES. I'm going to talk to you about a whole bunch of things today, but really talk about how you can do things around your property to infiltrate stormwater, to control stormwater that will protect your property, so that we can preserve our lakes and our surface waters around the state of New Hampshire. So I'm going to start with this here, full disclosure. Don talked about he spoiled my my reveal here just a little bit, but this is me, the biologist. Again, I've been working at the state of New Hampshire for 24 years now. I've been doing work in streams, lakes for a long time. Started as the biomonitoring program manager. Now I oversee most of the surface water quality monitoring in the state of New Hampshire, freshwater that is. However, as Don mentioned, I am a part-time resident within the Lake Wentworth Watershed. That's my modest house. And if you happen to be out on Lake Wentworth, this is my boat, so please don't be bashful. Come on up, say hello. We're here on most weekends. We spend a lot of time on the lake. Please stop by and say hello. And this is the community that I'm part of. It's Wentworth Watershed Estates, which was started about 50 years ago and has been lovingly cared for by the residents, and my wife and I and children are happy to be part of this community. And as you can see, they've taken great care to protect that waterfront area. So I think it's important to preach what practice what you preach. So before we get on, I just want to give a quick background on some of the water quality of what we know about the state of New Hampshire. We've been working very hard over the past several years or so to do some comprehensive monitoring around the state and report on those data. What I found when I started in my position was we were collecting a whole bunch of data and weren't doing much with that information. On occasion we do some things, but there wasn't a lot of comprehensive reports, and it's really important to be able to report on that data because it's worthless if we're just putting it in a binder or saving it on a computer somewhere and not sharing it with the public. So I'll start with these here, just a couple of reports that we've recently released about the water quality of our streams. We do these things called statewide assessments of rivers and streams, and I'll show you one for lakes as well. It's sort of like a political survey where you go out and sample a subsample of the population. You can say a whole bunch of things about the entire population. And then back in 2019, we have a trend monitoring network, and we sample about 40 rivers and streams on a regular basis, and we produced a trend monitoring report on that. We did the same for lakes as well, did this probability assessment where we go out and sample 50 lakes and can report on the condition of the entire state of New Hampshire, the lakes. And then we also looked at the trends, status and trends of water bodies that are repetitively sampled over multiple years. So what do these reports tell us? Start with the rivers and streams. The first pie chart on the left is from that probability-based sample. It's a really good sort of summary of what we know based on the data from around the state of New Hampshire. And the good news is, you can see on the right there, that our aquatic life tend to be in fairly good shape. About 50% of our streams and rivers that we sampled had really high quality fish and macroinvertebrate communities. However, as you can see in the pink part of the pie chart there, there's a whole bunch of our stream river miles that are not such great condition. And again, those were based on fish and macroinvertebrates. The other thing I want to point out from our river and trend sampling, or river status and trend sampling that we do on those 40 stations, there's a whole bunch of streams that we don't have enough information to report on those trends, but of those ones that we do, we know that 5 had increasing specific conductance levels. So specific conductance is a measure of how well the water conducts electricity. It's a really good measure of general amount of ions in the stream itself. 6 had decreasing trends in pH. So while we think that acid rain we don't worry about as much as we used to, we still have some issues related to it. Water temperature, we think about climate change. We did have 4 streams that the sort of stream benchmark temperature that we would use were above what we would expect. And then 18 sites that we had median phosphorus concentrations on exceeded what we would sort of expect as a statewide median. So things are in decent shape, but probably not as good as we'd like to see them. So let's switch our talk a little bit to lake water quality. The chart on the left there is a summary of that probability-based sampling again that we did on 50 lakes. Oh, I'm sorry, that's from our rivers that do our VLAP lakes that we were able to do status and trends on. The plot there shows, again, we're talking about specific inductance, and the ones that are above the red line, those boxes that are above the red line, show that there's a significant increasing trend in specific inductance. And it wasn't a small amount. It was 43%, almost half of our water bodies had increasing trends in specific inductance. So that was, pretty surprising to us. The slide on the right there talks about that probability-based summary. We had, it basically summarizes the status or the condition of 2,100 water bodies, and about 242 had phosphorus concentrations that were higher than what would be expected. 339 had dissolved oxygen concentrations that were lower than the statewide criteria, and 123 had chlorophyll A. That's a measure of the production of the lake that were higher than statewide thresholds. So again, it's not all great news. Let's talk about ice out. It's probably one of the best indicators we have of how our climate is changing. This is a plot that was included in that statewide lakes and ponds status and trends report. Kirsten Hugger, one of my colleagues, analyzed ice out data over a number of years, and what you can see here is the data from a whole bunch of lakes. Those are individual dots. The black line shows the ice out date, the median ice out date, and that sort of depicts the trend. And if you go back to back in the 40s, early 30s, you can see that ice out was typically in late April, early May, and now we're seeing ice out in early April, mid-April. So we're losing, several weeks in terms of ice out and ice cover. And just to bring that message home, this is the number of ice-covered weeks we've had in the state of New Hampshire over multiple years, and this comes from our volunteer lake assessment program. If folks aren't reporting their ice in and ice out data, you can do that through the VLAP program. You don't even have to be a member of VLAP. You can still report your data. And this shows the number of weeks of ice cover over many years, going back to 2017. And you can see, obviously, we had a very mild winter this last year, only about 9 weeks of ice cover. So things are changing, and that means a lot to our water bodies. We get much warmer waters much earlier. We have longer growing seasons. It's really significant. So let's talk about the hot topic that I spend a lot of time talking about all the time, and that is cyanobacteria. This shows the number of cyanobacteria advisories, or we call them warnings now, and alerts that have been posted on our water bodies going back to 2003. Obviously, people are becoming much more informed about cyanobacteria. So there's a couple of things going on here. Yes, there's more cyanobacteria, but people are reporting them more often than they used to. But it's pretty clear that the trend towards increasing cyanobacteria blooms is pretty significant. Bloom warnings have definitely increased over time. Last year we had almost 70 warnings. Blooms last on average about 25 days, but sometimes they're very few days, sometimes they're over 100 days. We had 2 water bodies last year that were over 100 days. Earliest bloom last year was May 18th. I think we eclipsed that. We had an earlier bloom this year. And then the latest date is in December. So these blooms are consuming a good part of our recreational season, and even before and after at this point. So if you want to know about cyanobacteria blooms, this is the best thing to check. It's our healthy swimming mapper. We update it daily. It's easy to find on the DES webpage. It provides information on blooms around the state. It has pictures associated with those blooms. It has the density of the blooms, and it has the type of bloom, like the different taxa that occur. So that's a really good way to find out what the most current information. If you'd like to report a bloom, that's the big QR code right there. So if you see a bloom, you can use that QR code, report it to us, and we will advise somebody to go there and take a sample. We may email you and ask you if you're willing to take a sample. We may be able to get out there and take a sample. We've advanced our capabilities for tracking blooms and reporting on blooms pretty significantly over the past few years, and this healthy swimming mapper is one of the best ways to do it. We also have ways, if you'd like to sign up for an individual water body and get reports on them regularly, there's ways to do that as well. So let's talk about the specific water bodies in the town of Wolfboro and their cyanobacteria histories. And again, all this information is available on that Healthy Swimming Mapper. All these histories are available. So you can go to any water body in the state of New Hampshire and look at these histories. So Lake Winnipesaukee, we do weird things with Winnipesaukee at the state of New Hampshire. That's the section that we have on the particular Healthy Swimming Mapper that's reported. And for some reason, we call it Wolfboro, Tuftonboro, and Alton. Of course, that doesn't include Alton Bay. But there's the history that we know of that's been reported to us dating back to 2018. It's not extensive, thankfully, but who knows what will happen in the future. Again, you can go check on that yourself. Gliotrichia is the one that we see regularly in Winnipesaukee and some of the other water bodies around here. And it's just it is a natural part of the lake community out there, but it's being reported on a more regular basis at this time. Lake Wentworth, I was very happy, not really, to see that Lake Wentworth had an alert posted yesterday that this is perfect for my talk today. But Lake Wentworth has had several alerts over the past several years. Again, most of them are related to Gliotrichia, the one that's commonly part of the natural lake community, and we see it regularly, dating back to 2021. So, again, that information is available for you to see. There's only been one warning. That's when we really feel like recreational activities should be suspended because there's a risk of health impacts. Rust Pond, very close, but very limited information, which is a good thing. But nevertheless, one warning dating back to 2009. And again, all these histories are available, and it's a really nice way to track. And we really encourage people to take a look at this information when they're going to visit a water body for the first time. Crescent Lake, obviously we're all connected here in the town of Wolfboro. Again, one warning dating back to last year. This one was relatively significant, but didn't last very long. The density was relatively high. And then up a little bit north in Mirror Lake, warnings that have dated back to 2018 seem to be a little more frequently occurring in Mirror Lake, again, with some densities that are relatively high. So again, all this information is available, and I would encourage you to go look at these on the Healthy Swimming Mapper. Well, this is a lot, right? So this is one of my coworkers' office, and we were told that we were getting new office furniture, and I said, wow, this is going to be a problem for Wayne, because he's got a lot of work to do. And it can be overwhelming if we take it all at once, right? If we told Wayne he had to clean up his office in a couple days, it'd be too much for Wayne. But if we take it a little bit at a time, and we all take a little bit of responsibility, or if we work with our friends and neighbors to help them take some responsibility, then it's not so bad. So let's talk about things that we can do. Let's talk about the principles that sort of guide what we're going to talk about. And this guy, Isaac Newton, lived back in the 1600s, and we all know the story. He was staring at an apple tree one day, and an apple fell, and he discovered gravity. Well, maybe it wasn't that simple. But gravity is the major force that structures all of our lives. And it's really critical in understanding how we can manage water and the way it flows, because it flows downhill. It follows gravity. So the little cartoon on the left is a watershed cartoon. Everybody, I think, knows what a watershed is. That's the general area that drains to a common sort of endpoint for water. And there's a whole bunch of different types of inputs into a watershed. It can be a large area, like Lake Winnipesaukee, and you have tributaries, you have overland flow that runs off into it. But if we think about it on a local level, it's not different at all. It still follows those principles of gravity, and water flows downhill. And this is actually our old truck on a water body in the state of New Hampshire, a rural road that was a dirt road and wasn't well drained. And it's probably kind of hard to see, but you can see the plume of turbidity that ended up in the lake. And that is the water body. So this is Nippo Lake in Barrington, had pretty significant cyanobacteria blooms for about 10 years. Some of the pollution that was discovered was coming from a dirt road flowing downhill with improperly managed stormwater. And I like to show this slide because it gives people an idea of cyanobacteria and what controls their abundance, what controls their prevalence in our water bodies. It's a really simplified equation, but I think it really brings home the point. Cyanobacteria love light, they love heat, and they love nutrients. And we want to avoid a bloom, or a boom as I call it. We can't really control the amount of light that the water body gets. We can't control the heat necessarily. Yes, we can all start driving electric cars, and that'll probably help globally eventually, but it's not going to change the amount of heat that is entering the water body in your backyard. But what we can do is control the amount of nutrients that enter our water body from the external sources. That's really, really critical to think about. And the nutrients that are important to our surface waters are nitrogen and phosphorus primarily. So it's not just, lakes and ponds. It's not just our roadways, but water follows the path of least resistance no matter where we are. And this is just an example that I came across one day coming back from doing some field work. I was driving down Route 16 up by the Androscoggin River, and they were, I think, clearing some vegetation on the side of the road. It was a pretty major project to improve the sight lines on Route 16. And there was a thunderstorm. And I just happened to see this. And here's an example of how bad erosion can be during a stormwater event. The little stream on the left, even though they had some stormwater control structures in place, was overwhelmed. And there was a whole bunch of bare soil exposed. And that stormwater was picking up a massive amount of erosion, sedimentation, and delivering it directly to the water body. And it was even flowing through the culverts that they had put in place. And this is the Androscoggin River. I was just aghast at this. You could see the very distinct line of where that stormwater, which was following that path of least resistance, picking up all that sediment, and running directly into the Androscoggin River. And it was, a quarter of the river was completely brown just because of this event. So we have to think about this on the local level as well and things that we can do, and that's what I really want to talk about. Stormwater, it accounts for about 50% of our water quality impairments in the state of New Hampshire. Every 2 years, we have to issue a report to Congress to tell them the condition of our water bodies. Part of that report is our 303D list, which is a section of the Clean Water Act. We have to tell them which of our water bodies are impaired. And those impairments, stormwater accounts for 50% of the problems that we have. We have these assessment units, rivers. We have, length of river, that's a particular assessment unit. A lake, usually an entire lake is one assessment unit. Those are the number of assessment units that are impaired by stormwater. So it's not small, it's a lot. So let's talk about this idea of stormwater and how important it is to things that we do on our landscape. Developed lands load nutrients at a rate that are 8 times greater than undeveloped lands. So that's our households, our neighborhoods, our communities. Impervious surface, that's areas that are paved over, have roofs. All of that water, none of it infiltrates into the ground. It all gets delivered to other areas and then conveyed to our surface waters, unless we're able to manage it before it gets there. Any unvegetated areas that we have on our landscape, they're subject to erosion. Fertilizers and pesticides, they also run off with the soils. We haven't talked about it yet, but I do have a slide in a little bit, but it also conveys de-icers during the winter months. And that goes back to those specific conductance readings that I talked about in our water quality reports. It's very apparent that the amount of ice management materials, salt that we're adding to our streets and roads and walkways is really impacting our surface waters. So I just have a quick example here, and I don't know if this is right, but I'll run through it nonetheless. A modest-sized house. has a garage. I don't think any of this is, unreasonable for most of us. Has a walkway, has a deck, has a patio, and has a driveway. And I think this is probably actually an underestimate. I did a little bit of math. Creates about 2,800 square feet of impervious surface. If we get one rainfall event that's an inch, it adds 1,700 gallons of surface water to the surrounding land. I was blown away by this when I did this calculation. 1,700 gallons of water that needs to be managed. That's a lot of water. So managing that water is really important. So I want to talk about that a little bit. And there's two really good guides out there that I would point you guys to when I'm going to use examples here going forward. There's one that was published by UNH some time ago. It's really excellent. It talks about things, how you can plan your landscape that's protective of the surface waters. The other one on the right here is done by DES. It's called our Soak Up the Rain program. And it's sort of a DIY manual on how you can do smaller projects. And I'm going to use several examples of this going forward around your home to manage stormwater. And there's 5 really critical principles, and this comes from that UNH landscaping design manual. Detention, diversion, flow spreading, infiltration, and plant absorption and transpiration. So detention is those larger ponds that you may see and are appropriate for neighborhoods that are going to hold that storm water and allow it to infiltrate into the ground. Diversion, that's diverting, obviously, the water into an area where it can be, again, infiltrated into the ground rather than running through a stormwater conveyance. Flow spreading, that's an idea of spreading the water out over to make it sort of shallower, to slow it down so it doesn't pick up as much erosion. Infiltration, talked about that a little bit. That's getting it into the ground, absorbing it into the ground. And then plant absorption, we all know plants need a lot of water. You have a garden, you have flowers, you have to water it regularly. Think about all the trees and underbrush that we have. They use a lot of water. So they're ideal ways to get water uptaken into them rather than run off into our surface waters. They're critical. So just want to talk a little bit about the Soak Up the Rain program. It's been really successful and popular. It's mostly an outreach and education program. We have a lot of materials on a website. We meet with groups on a pretty regular basis. We have in the past formed these partnerships where we go out and help people do various DIY projects and provide some technical assistance in terms of planning and getting the materials there for them. And we also do trainings to help people understand how to sort of promote this idea to other people in their neighborhood or in their town. So let's just talk about some of the very simple things that the Soak Up the Rain program, or you can do around your Soak Up the Rain program promotes, and things that you can do around your property. This idea of a drip line driveway infiltration trench. So this is a way to infiltrate water, rainwater, off of a roof or off of a driveway. It's fairly simple. You dig a trench, you can have some fabric underneath it, and add some stone on top, and then that water that runs off, rather than continuing to run off onto the roadways or into a ditch, it gets absorbed into the ground. So a couple of examples. Here's a home without the drip line trench. You can see, again, the follow the flow idea is repeated throughout these slides. Goes downhill, follows Isaac Newton's gravity principles, and there it is after. It's pretty simple to do, but that's, an afternoon of pretty hard, strenuous work, but it's something that you can do on your own, and that allows that stormwater to be managed before it gets to a stormwater conveyance like a ditch. Infiltration steps. Everybody that has a lakefront property or enjoys a lakefront property, they obviously want to access the water body. Here's an example of a water body access area before the infiltration steps were installed. You can imagine when there's a heavy rainstorm event, all the erosion that occurs down that area. So this idea of installing infiltration steps is a great way to manage that stormwater. And you have these incremental step downs of areas where stormwater infiltration is possible rather than it just running over the ground and down to the water. Of course, you can't just do it and leave it forever. When you have a heavy storm, sometimes there's maintenance that's required. You have to get the debris out of there because those infiltration areas will become clogged with that debris if you don't maintain it over time. Okay, so, hey, all right. We use this photo all the time, so. Again, sort of the infiltration step idea, following the flow and fixing it so that water is managed before it gets to the surface water. Rain gardens. I know several of you have probably already installed rain gardens, but another great way to manage stormwater before it gets to the surface water and to also beautify your property. So here's a great example of a rain garden that was installed. The idea is to get stormwater, say from a roof or a gutter area, into this rain garden. It provides a way for the rain garden to get water to it and to keep it thriving, but also to infiltrate that water into the ground. And there's a whole bunch of different types of native vegetations that are really appropriate for rain gardens. And again, here's the idea. You have a pipe that's delivering that stormwater, say from your roof, into a rain garden. It's going into that, the area of the rain garden. And there's even can be outlets to the rain garden so that if it gets overflowed, at least you have a way for some of that water to be relieved and for the plants to thrive. Again, something very simple that everybody can do around their properties: install a rain barrel. So if you have gutters, you're collecting that storm water. This water is a valuable resource, right? There's places all over the world that would love to have the water that we have here in New England to be able to water their plants, take care of their agriculture, any animals that they have. Well, this is a great way to capture that rainwater. And if you have, a fairly large roof, you can daisy chain these things together. You can grab that rainwater and then you can use it to water your plants in your property. Or you can just infiltrate it slowly over time into your ground rather than having it quickly all run off into the surrounding area. So their idea, we have a lot of dirt roads on our properties that run to or lead to our surface waters, right? It was very common, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, for these camp roads to be built, and it was meant to access, a couple of camps. Well, they still exist as dirt roads, right? Really hard to manage that water. This idea of using ways to divert the water. Again, diversion is one way you can help get it off of that road and into a surrounding buffer before it becomes a problem. This idea of a rubber razor, and we have one of these in the Wentworth Estates, actually. So again, the idea of following the flow down this driveway. What you can do is dig a trench. You can get the material. There's a rubber razor. You can get it from a variety of places and attach it to a very firm structure. Bury that and backfill it with some dirt and some gravel. And then as the water runs down there, it's diverting it off to the side rather than allowing it to flow directly down to the water body. So these are pretty simple things. I don't know. It doesn't look quite like a state operation. There's only 3 guys there. If it was a state operation, there would probably be 6 people there. But an afternoon of hard work and something that could be, done relatively easy. Generally, you don't need a permit to do this. There's not a lot of material. It's not really expensive. And it can be protective and manage stormwater. And you can drive over it. Of course, vegetative buffers, they're the ideal way to protect our water bodies. A natural vegetative buffer like this is the way to manage that stormwater as it comes down. We all love the view of our water bodies, but there's many ways we can enjoy that view and still maintain the natural vegetation. Or, if you don't have natural vegetation, you can always replant a garden or some trees. And we encourage everybody to do this. If you happen to purchase a property and it's devoid of any vegetation that goes down to the water body, you can plant things like this. You can get native vegetation. You can do a variety of different zonal sort of areas where you have lower underbrush, you have larger trees, you have ground cover. That's all really helpful to protect the surface water and sort of maintain a healthy structure along the shoreline and stability of the shoreline. Of course, this is the natural woodland buffer, and that's ideal. That's what we'd love to see. But again, if you don't have a natural woodland buffer, you can restore it. You can use plants that grow to different heights, as I mentioned. The best thing to do is to test the soil and understand what types of soil you have before you go and buy the plants that you think are going to do well. And then increase the buffer width as the slope gets steeper. And this is what we don't want, right? This is just the classic picture of an overdeveloped lakefront. People that love their lake to death, basically. They've got a lawn to the edge, and they're out there happily mowing it without their shirt on. They've got a retaining wall, so there's absolutely no sort of natural structure along the water's edge. They have 0 trees to sort of buffer the area between the water and where the stormwater will be running off. And they have a completely artificial beach that they've installed over time. And that's not even talking about all the houses that we see there. We're talking about the fact that there's absolutely no sewered areas in this area. Every single one of these homes are on a septic system. This is what we don't want. So I said I was going to talk a little bit about dirt roads. I'll talk about that just a little bit. So again, a very severe rain event, and the photo credit here is to FB Environmental. This is a lake that we recently worked on, Lake Kanasaka, over in Moultonborough. This is one of the dirt roads that ran directly down to the lake. Controlling all that erosion before it gets to the lake is really critical. And there is a really nice manual out there that's understandable. I'm not an engineer, I'm a biologist, but this manual is really helpful. And it's really understandable. And just some key points that I found in reviewing this is, inspect the driveways and roadways, dirt roads regularly, especially during storm events, so that you know where the water is flowing, so you understand where the problem areas are. Use proper materials on a dirt road. There is sort of a right solution and a wrong solution. There should be a mix of, larger particles and finer particles so that it all sort of mixes together and makes a hard surface and doesn't wash away. It makes it less susceptible to erodibility. When you're regrading the road, make sure there's a crown, a high spot in the center, and make sure that all the little berms on the side that keeps everything in, like a luge run, you make sure that you remove those. Look at the culverts. Evaluate those culverts, make sure they're in decent shape, clean them out to make sure that it convey that water and doesn't back up and stay on the road. The idea is to get the water off the road as soon as possible. And use turnouts in those ditch areas where there's sort of natural areas to get the water off to the side so it doesn't continue down the road. Maintain those ditches regularly, make sure they're properly sized. Sometimes it's really challenging because obviously there's restrictions based on the property in the area on how big you can make your ditches. The key is to manage the water from its sort of source and don't wait till the end, because that's the hardest place to manage it. Now all of a sudden you've got a torrent of water running down and nowhere to put it, and it's carrying all the sediment that it's already picked up, maybe some fertilizers and maybe some pesticides. So the idea is if everybody can manage their stormwater, initially, that's the best way to do it rather than waiting to the end. And let's just talk a little bit about chlorides, because I did mention the increasing trends we've seen in specific conductants. too much salt is a bad thing. That's too much salt right there. It should be dissolved. You should not see, like big areas of white on a parking area or on your driveway or your walkway. We use a lot of salt. Most of it does go to parking lots, but obviously we use a lot of it on our personal sort of areas in our driveways and walkways. So the key is to use fewer de-icers, use them only when needed, and use them only when they're effective. Most salt is not effective as temperatures get below like 15 or 20 degrees. It doesn't do anything, it just sits there. So you're better off using like sand or something like that. So it's really critical to understand this and use as little of these de-icing materials as possible. So all these things I've talked about right now today really come back to these ideas of providing homeowner assistance. I've talked about the Soak Up the Rain program. There's the link to that if you're interested. Again, it's a really good source of information if you want to get started doing some projects around your house. And again, as you implement these projects, it's less work for you over the time because the stormwater is managed rather than having these problem areas that you have to continually go back to and fix all the time. These stormwater management structures will help sort of protect your property. Of course, the New Hampshire Lakes is a great program. I would encourage you all to get involved in this. It's a Lake Smart program. They'll come out and take a look at your personal property and give you an idea of how lake smart or lake friendly it is. It's not, there's no sort of problems going down the road with it where you would have somebody going after you for a permit or anything like that. It's solely for your own personal sort of information and ways to make your property as lake smart as possible. And lastly, here in the Wentworth Watershed Association, there's the Lake Minded program, which probably works pretty closely with the Lakes Smart program, but has a similar type of framework as well. So I would encourage you to get involved in any of these programs because that will help you manage your stormwater on your personal property and let people know in your community that these resources are available to them. So I do want to just end with a little overview of the Shoreline Protection Act because that's the regulatory structure that the state implements for sort of major projects within 250 feet of the shoreline. Applies to all lakes and ponds that are 10 acres or greater, applies to all rivers and streams that are fourth order or larger. And again, it's got these three sort of tiered systems. The waterfront buffer that's 0 to 50 feet, the woodland buffer that's 0 to 150 feet, and then the entire shoreline protection area, which is up to 250 feet. And there's different sorts of regulations. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this, but I just want to talk about the major components of it. Projects must be within 250 feet, or all projects within 250 feet must meet all the requirements. No fertilizers or pesticides are allowed within 25 feet. Stormwater management is required for certain new activities. I don't know why this font is jumping around like this on me. Sorry about that. If you're increasing the size of your footprint, which is possible, there is a requirement to do a stormwater management plan. Some of it can be done at the homeowner level. Some of it requires an engineered solution. New septic systems must be 75 feet from the water, and primary structures must be 50 feet or more from the water. Otherwise, they're non-conforming, and there's certain sort of restrictions that apply to that. I would tell you, rather than trying to diagnose and understand all this yourself, if you're thinking about a project that may require a Shoreline Protection Act permit, it's best to hire a professional and have them do that work for you. So with that, I would take any questions that you might have, depending on the format that we're running here today, and thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Dave. So we have time for a couple questions, and then we can, if you have other questions for Dave, he's going to be around during the break, and we're going to bring him back up at the end as well. Skip.
It's a two-part question. The first part is, are we seeing more cyanobacteria warnings just because we're testing more, so we're looking for it and we're finding it? And then the follow-up question is, when you issue the alerts, okay, there's a warning on Lake Wentworth, but it just says there's a warning on Lake Wentworth. Well, where? I mean,
I love the energy with that question. So the first question was about whether they're increasing in their frequency. And I think the general answer is yes. But your supposition that, we're looking more for them definitely impacts the frequency of what we're seeing. But I do feel comfortable in saying that they're becoming more frequent than they have in the past, relative to where they are around the water body. It's a question that we get regularly. And what I would tell you is we have been really trying to promote this idea of a self-risk assessment. And the reason we do that is because the where is really difficult to answer, and cyanobacteria plumes are very, very dynamic. So it's really hard to tell people that the cyanobacteria bloom was located on the northwest shore of this water body. Well, it might have been there that day. It might have been there that morning. But in the afternoon, it might be on the southeast shore, depending on the wind. So what we try to tell people is that the warning that we're issuing, it's a lake-wide warning. And we tell people to be careful out there and that recreation is discouraged, but that they're also should be doing this, using this thing, the idea of a self-risk assessment, where they check the mapper, which if they know there's a warning, they've already done that. They should be educated on about what cyanobacteria are and what they look like, and they should go down to their water body and look at it and say, I don't see it here. I could probably swim. Or I have some health condition, so I need to be really careful about this, so maybe I'm not going to swim. Or I'm a young, healthy person. Yeah, I'll take a risk. Why not? It's clear, it looks good, I'll go for it. Or the wind is blowing out of this direction, and I know when the wind blows out of that direction, it's going to pile up over here, so probably better to go over there. So that's kind of what we've been trying to communicate to people. I know it's really challenging, but what we don't want to tell people is that it was on the northwest part of the shore of the lake, and everybody going over on the southeast like, yeah, we're great, it's all good for me, and they go out there and go swimming and get sick. So that's kind of the way we've been dealing with it.
But a follow-up answer to that question. I took your advice and went to the New Hampshire State website, blooms, and you can actually find where it's located there. Wentworth State Park is where they showed it. So I missed. This is 2, 5, 6.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think probably what you're looking at is the fecal advisor that's been posted on the state beach. So that's another thing. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, so I'm waiting actually for a text later on today, and I've talked to the state park manager who is here, and I will be letting them know later on today whether that can be removed. So,
Dave, can you talk about just maybe an alert and a warning?
yeah. So Don whispered in my ear, can I talk about the difference between an alert and a warning? Because we have these two sort of tiered systems now for cyanobacteria. And we started doing the alerts a couple years ago because we were getting reports of cyanobacteria blooms. Some of them were below what we consider to be a risky level. And then we were also getting some that we couldn't act upon very quickly. So we have this alert cyanobacteria alerts that are posted. Those are posted either when we don't have a chance to process a sample, when we want to get the word out to people, or when the water body, when we were able to process a sample and it was below the threshold that we would use to issue a warning. So we have that level. The warning level is issued when densities in a sample that we process are above 70,000 cells per milliliter. We use that 70,000 cells per milliliter as a threshold because we know that once it's above that, there's a higher frequency that cyanotoxins may be present at a level which are challenges. So we have the alert, which is a little bit lower, and then we have warnings, which is a slightly bit higher, and that's where we ask people that they do not recreate in the water body, and they use this idea of a self-risk assessment if they decide to take that risk.
Well, thanks so much, Dave. Dave's going to be around for a while. You can talk to him at the break. We'll have him come back up when we do the panel discussion later. If there's lingering questions, if you don't want to ask one in the open forum, you can write it down on a card and send them forward, and we'll get them asked. So now we're going to have a program on shoreline landscaping this summer, and to sort of kick that off are a couple of people that are going to come up and talk now. Joyce Pepin. She's a board member of Wentworth Watershed, and she's a key member of the water quality team for Lake Wentworth, and she's come up to speed very, very far in a short time. She's been a great addition to our team in the last few years. And then Pat Tarpey from the Lake Winnipesaukee Association almost needs no introduction to this crowd. She's involved in just about every project that happens in our region, and has been the executive director of the Lake Winnipesaukee Association for many, many years. So they're going to come up and give a quick spiel on a program for later this summer.
Good morning. As Don said, my name is Joyce Pepin, and I'm a member of the Wentworth Watershed Association Board and a co-chair of the Water Quality Committee. So my husband and I purchased a property on Lake Wentworth 14 years ago, and we've been here full-time for just the past 3 years. And today I'd like to share some of the things I've learned while volunteering for and then working with the Wentworth Watershed Association over the last decade about how, as Dave said, we can all participate in keeping our waters healthy and clean. There's so many ways to contribute, no matter where you live inside the watershed. So one of the main things, as Dave mentioned, to hurt our lakes is stormwater runoff. When we first arrived in Wolfboro, I had never even heard of the term stormwater runoff. How can we even help? How can we stop the rain? We can't stop the rain. Like, what can we do about this thing called stormwater runoff? But now I know that there's many things we can do, big or small, to slow the rainwater that's running across our property into our water bodies, carrying all the nutrients that will cause trouble. So one of the simplest things you can do is to follow the water on your property when it rains. So I'm reiterating some of the same things that Dave has said, because it's true and it is simple. When it rains, you can see where the water is going on your property, where it's running, what it's carrying with it. See how it's flowing into any local streams or culverts. Then think, how can I slow this water down? How can I stop this water from coming off my roof and flowing into the stream next to my property? How can I do that? And it might be a rain barrel or a water infiltration trench underneath a gutter spout to capture all the water that's running off of your roof. It could be a winding path that you add stones to slow down that water that's flowing down it and capture it and allow it to drain into the ground. Maybe it's a rain garden in a low spot that will collect all the water. Or an infiltration trench, that's really a mouthful, that Dave had shown a slide about that you can put next to your driveway, because of course driveways, especially if they're paved, it's just a runway for water. So there are lots of different ways that you can capture this rainwater. And I feel like there's something for everyone, and it doesn't have to be expensive. On our property right now, we're doing some modifications, and I personally have been looking for resources and ways that I can get ideas. So I encourage you all to look at your properties. Pick a project. It can be a small project, could be a big project. One of the things I already had written down to mention that Dave showed a bunch of are the do-it-yourself fact sheets on the Soak Up the Rain New Hampshire website. They're great. I mean, it really gives you very detailed information about how you can do these projects by yourself. Maybe grab a neighbor and help each other out, because for some of us, it's not very easy to take a shovel and dig a trench and then shovel stones into it, right? Use your community, use your neighbors to help with some of these projects. The UNH Cooperative Extension website also has lists of native plants that you could use for a buffer or a rain garden. And then at the Wentworth Watershed Association, we can help through our Lake Minded program. We can visit your property and provide ideas for ways to capture and infiltrate the rainwater. And you can see Dan Ross, he's at the table in the back of the room. If you want to sign up for one of these visits, and you can also email or call the WWA office at any time to set up one of these visits if you'd like someone to come and look at your property with you. So my neighbor and I had the Lake-Minded folks come to both of our properties in one day a couple of years ago, so that I went to her property and heard what they had to tell her. She came to my property so she could hear what they were telling me, so we could share ideas and kind of support each other and hear what they had to say on both of our different lands. So grab a neighbor, grab a friend, and set up a visit, and they can give you some really good ideas about what you can do on your property. One more way to get ideas for what you can do to help slow this rainwater is to attend the landscaping workshop for homeowners and landscapers. That's happening here in the Great Hall on June 20th at 4 o'clock, offered by the Lake Winnipesaukee Association. If you do a project on your property, whether it's a big project or a very small project, please let us know. We would love to see them and possibly include them as part of the update that we're doing to our watershed management plan. If you're willing to share your project with others, please let us know that too. It's helpful for your neighbors who are starting a project to see something that's already been done or see it in process. You can get ideas from it and also spark ideas for other projects in the watershed. Before I forget to say it too, if you want to see Dan during the break, he's got a slideshow back there that shows some projects that have been completed and before and after. So I think that's really helpful. It is for me, at least when I'm trying to think about what to do on my property. We also have landscaping in the watershed brochures, which are over on the table over there. And the Wentworth Watershed Association website has information and links on keeping our waters healthy. If you live on a private road that you pay to maintain, there were great pictures you had, Dave, of the private camp roads. We've started a group for road agents that are in charge of this kind of maintenance. It's a space where they can share resources with each other, like who are you using to plow your road? I have this huge washout on my road. Has anyone had this before? What can I do about it? So it's a space where they can share information, ask questions, share successes on how to keep their roads safe and to mitigate the water runoff. So if you are a road agent or know somebody or a part of a camp road and know a road agent that might like to be involved, please see me at the break and we can add you to that group. If you want to participate in helping our water stay healthy by even volunteering to pick up a shovel and help your neighbor dig a trench, please let us know that too. Even pumping your septic system regularly or using fertilizer on your property that has no phosphorus really helps our lakes. So it can be something as simple as that. And FYI, my husband and I found some great fertilizer that doesn't contain phosphorus up at the grain store on Route 16, if anyone's interested. So the bottom line is that we can all work together to make a difference in our watershed. Thank you.
I'm going to be quick. I'm just putting in a plug. Thank you, Joyce. She did it, but we are holding a lake-friendly landscaping workshop here in the Great Hall, June 20th from 4 to 5. We will have Chris Maroon from Miracle Farms here with some plants, and just to talk about that. And also, Bree Rossiter, our Conservation Program Manager, will talk about the Be Winnie Blue and Lake Smart program, which is a partnership with New Hampshire Lakes. So as Joyce mentioned, you can sign up. We'll go out, visit your property. It's free. Walk it with you, and then give you some recommendations and write up a report. And so I have these flyers on our table in the back if you're interested. It has a QR code you can scan and just sign up. Thank you.
We'll hear a little bit more from Pat later. She's got other messages to give us too. So we're going to go to a break in a little bit here, and I'd encourage you to see, walk around and talk to all the tables around and the people there. They have some great information. There's some snacks, or if you prefer, you can call it your second breakfast. So it doesn't seem like or lunch, whatever you like. But the speakers are around, and we'll reconvene in about 25 minutes to a half an hour. But this is the time where all the important discussion happens. So feel free to corner whoever you like. And thanks so much. We'll give everyone about a minute to get back to their seats, and then we'll get started. Okay, well, it seemed like there was plenty of conversations going on. I got involved in a couple myself, and that's the kind of exchange that we really like to see. We're going to hear in the second session from each of the individual sort of water entities that are active in Wolfboro. And to kick it off, we're going to have Julie Brown, the Executive Director of the Wentworth Watershed. And Julie, as well as being Executive Director, she's involved in all the initiatives and committees that the association is involved in. She's a former teacher who brings many life experiences from across the globe to her job. And she's going to talk a little bit. And again, these talks are going to be like 5 minutes. So if you, I'm going to kind of hold you to it because we've run out of time in past years. So 5 minutes to kind of give an update of the major accomplishments of the group for the year and what they're working on for next year. So first up is Julie Brown.
Well, the good news is I planned this, and Pat and I each get 10 minutes, Dawn, so just so you know. I point this way. So thank you all again for staying, and I hope you enjoyed the delicious lunch provided by the funds from our sponsors who support this event, and Aaron Morrissey made them. So I wanted to talk very briefly and give a bit of a recap about what the Wentworth Watershed Association's been up to with watershed management planning and the effects we've had in the watershed in the previous years and where we're going in the future. This is our mission. So since 2010, the Wentworth Watershed Association in its previous form, the Lake Wentworth Association, was engaged in the original watershed management plan for the sub-watershed of that flows into Lake Winnipesaukee. We joke we give Pat all of our clean water. So the planning phase was phase 1 for the watershed management plan that was completed and published in 2012, which really looked at the sub-watershed, which makes up about 88% of Wolfboro. So most of your water that comes off your properties flows into Lake Wentworth, Crescent Lake, or Sargent's Pond, and eventually makes its way through the Smith River down across into Back Bay, which is actually, its real name is Front Bay, and flows into Lake Winnipesaukee. So you are all part of our watershed management plan. So during that management plan, we've had several phases, but during the planning phase, they did a big survey and looked at where our water flows, what the issues are, and identified areas to work on. And since that time, we've worked on it extensively. The thing I wanted to point out here is that, just like Dave said, the majority of issues that are coming and creating phosphorus loading and sediment loading in our watershed come from stormwater runoff. So previous years we've talked about salt, sand, septic. All of those are still major factors, but the stormwater runoff is what I want you to focus on your properties this year. We set lofty goals at that time of how much we were going to reduce, and those goals were set by the community and were pretty unrealistic, but we have made some really big steps towards accomplishing some of the goals. So as a refresher, during phase 2 with 319 funding, we did the construction on Jeans Beach, Mass Landing, and Auto Care Plus, which is, that's site now is Auto Care Plus behind the Wentworth Watershed Association offices. Phase 3 was Camp Birchmont, and that was a very successful project where we were able to infiltrate lots of water in one of the areas that was having a lot of sedimentation from their beaches and created a lot of amazing stormwater controls. And if you join us for the camp dinner this year, you'll get to see that in person. Phase 4, we worked on Fern Avenue over in Wentworth Park, across from the train station there. There was some issues there on that beach, as well as Pierce Camp Birchmont. As you may have noticed, there's some issues still happening on Camp Pierce Birchmont because of changes of the status of that beach, or the uplands to it. And so just because you've made an installation doesn't mean that it's going to continue to work over time. It's going to require maintenance and sometimes some adjustments. So the bigger projects that are happening that we've talked about with watershed management are those best management practices. It's a terrible name that applies to all industries, but it's the one we're stuck with. So there's infiltration trenches we talked about. There's some bigger projects that are engineered solutions, and that's what the 319 funding that we all are applying for can be used for some of these bigger projects. But some of the solutions are not that difficult, like the water bar that was made at Camp Birchmont to slow water flowing. That's concrete stamped that goes through it, and then the water gets sent into the woods to infiltrate. So some of them are complex and very engineered, while others are simpler. But today we're here to talk about the community implementations, and both of these are ones that were done in condoized communities, one of which was the rubber razor installation over here on the right-hand side that was installed over at Wentworth Estates, where Dave lives. And then the other one on the left-hand side, or my right-hand side, your left-hand side, is a rain garden that was installed at Kingswood Acres over on Crescent Lake. So these are much simpler installations that are being shown in practice. So what's next? Our watershed management plan is outdated. It still has a lot of the important parts of it that will remain the same. However, we have not been successful in the last 2 years in receiving 319 funding grants. And I'm assured by our contacts at DES, it's not because we didn't write them well. It's because there's a lot of organizations now who know about the funding and they're getting better at applying for it, and lakes that haven't received them in the past. So we are currently under a grant that we received for 604B planning grant, that we received half the funding from DES, $16,500, to work on updating our plan to make sure that it's accounting for land use currently in Wolfboro, how it's changed in the last 12 years, and helping us re-jockey the sites, reassess septic surveys, understanding what's happening along the shoreline, and using current water quality data to better identify the sites that we need to be working on next. So in the next year, you should be looking, if you're in the Wentworth Watershed, be looking to self-report on updates you've made to your properties, including septic systems. If you've improved it, your septic maintenance plan, if you can self-report, we would love to know if you've done something good. If you haven't done something good, we'll assume that you haven't. And we'll be looking at shorefront. So you may see boats driving and taking pictures, and we'll notify you ahead of time when we do our shorefront survey to look at what's happening along the shorefront on Crescent Lake and on Lake Wentworth. So we will also have some public input meetings. So we intend to kick off that work come probably fall, and you should expect to hear from us during the summer of next year, and hopefully the updated report will be complete before the winter. So that's the kind of the timeline of what's happening with our watershed management planning. As far as water quality goes, I'm going to keep this fairly quick. Our water quality program has been sampling through the Lakes Monitoring Program since 1985, And we've been looking for long-term trends as well as looking at tributary sampling for the past 7 or 8 years, maybe longer. We sample 28 tributaries during major rain events. Last year, as you recall, we had some insanely large rain events. And during those rain events, they call them 200, 300, some people said even 500-year storms that we received. When we received over an inch an hour, 5 inches in an hour, one of the storms. And because of that, it was not safe to send our volunteer tributary samplers out during those rain events. So unfortunately, we did not sample because it wasn't safe for our samplers. So we had less sampling events last year than we did in previous years, because after the deluge, then we were kind of in a dry situation. So we only had 60 sampling events last year. During that time, we test all those sampling sites for phosphorus, and the big change this year was that one of our brooks, Breezy Brook, which is coming out of North Wolfboro, from the farming area, had huge spikes in phosphorus. So this summer, we're going to be walking that brook, looking for point source pollution, see if we can find anything like we had a win a few years back, but we'll see. As far as in-lakes, our in-lakes water quality was fairly consistent. We did have some lower Secchi dish readings, meaning that the water was a little bit harder to look through. It was a little bit more tannin, but mostly it's because of the chlorophyll A, which obviously was caused by some of the cyanobacteria blooms we experienced last year. So our organization has a really active team of volunteers, which we are incredibly grateful for our dive team and our weed watchers, as well as our water quality samplers. We're always looking for more. I always say be succession planning. Everybody needs to figure out who their replacement will be, so I don't need to. So bring a friend. So we will continue to be looking for milfoil. Our dive team collected over 100 gallons of milfoil last year from a bunch of the mouths of tributaries, including Willie Brook, over in Heath Brook, and then also Crescent Lake tends to be where they focus the majority of their attention in an area near Porcupine Cove that they call Devil's Cove, and also by the Mass Landing boat ramp. We last year had more cyanobacteria days than we've had in record. As Dave mentioned, yes, they're increasing, and yes, you are getting better at knowing what you're seeing and reporting. But yes, they're more frequent. We are currently underneath an active alert, and that alert is because we discovered last year, I was taking my employee at the time out to train her how to grab water samples when we got a report of a potentially sick animal. It could be correlated or not. It looked just like pollen, and I got to the water. I was like, oh, it's just pollen, but I'll show you how to do this, and I'll take you through the process. And in the process, when we brought it to the Wolfboro Waters lab and looked at the fluorometer, we realized that it was actually inundated with Delicospermum at the same time this year. And later, we are pretty clear that that particular bloom did indeed have microcystis, which is a toxin, which could be very closely related to sick animals, although I would not say that because we don't have the extreme data, but I think it's a good correlation, and which is why we say keep animals out. I was expecting with the pollen to see it again this year, and I started getting all the phone calls yesterday when I was supposed to be preparing this presentation to run out and get the water samples, send out the alerts, and make that happen. So Delicospermum has been known in Lake Wentworth now to be toxic, so please stay out of the water when you see those pollen mats by your beach, and especially keep your dogs out of the water. Hopefully we will not move into a advisory/warning as DES has changed its targets, but do keep us informed if you see conditions change. It's the eyes on the water that are the ones that let us know what's happening. There's a protocol of how to do things. You can always call the police department and let them know that you're seeing something. You can also report, the best thing you can do is take a picture and report on Bloom Watch, the link that Dave showed you, as well as on our website of how you can self-report. But it's also good to give a call to the office so we can go look as well. I work closely with the state, and poor Kate Hastings is pretty, she's pulled thin across the state with all the water bodies, so usually we have you bring a sample to the office and we'll take a first look, and then I'll confirm with Kate that she needs to come collect the sample or not. So we all work as a team, and I really, really encourage all of you this year to please, please look at your properties. We are in a changing environment, a developing town. There are changes on your property that you can make really do make a big difference. If you need help with ideas, we're happy to help you. We'll point you to resources. We can point you to contractors. And we also have our Soak Up the Rain / Lake-Minded visits that we're happy to come out and give you ideas. And hopefully, in the future, we will figure out how to get some boots on the ground to help you do some of the digging if you can't do it yourself. So be part of the solution, and if you do something, take pictures and please bring them to the office so I can share with the community about the good works that you're doing. Thank you. Mary? So, short answer is no. So the work that we did through 319 grants on Camp Birchmont, there was over $250,000 of combined spending between the organization and DES on that site. And it's not currently in our plans for the next portion. As far as Mural Brook itself goes, I think walking it and looking at where things are coming, especially with the stakeholders in the area, we could potentially organize a walk, and we could also potentially work with Rick to think about, Rick Vanderpool, who's doing a lot of stream restoration, about his ideas of where we could maybe slow down the flow of that particular brook could be a good alternative. I'm out of time, but thank you so much for being here today. And if you have question cards, you can pass them into Dawn, and there's going to be a panel in a few minutes to answer the questions. So if I can't answer them, one of our experts might be able to even do a better job. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. You set a good example by staying on time. We're going to try to keep most of the questions for when the people are up here in the panel, so if you can hold them, unless it's something that's absolutely confusing you and incredibly urgent. So I get to introduce Pat Tarpey again, but I'm going to give a little longer introduction today. So Pat leads the Lake Winnipesaukee Association mission, which works to protect water quality and natural resources of Lake Winnipesaukee and its watershed. Her geographic area of interest covers nearly all of Wolfboro and all of the towns around Winnipesaukee, as well as those that have land draining to Winnipesaukee, which turns out to be, a huge portion of our state is sort of under the purview of the Lake Winnipesaukee Association and its watershed. And Pat has been working on that for a long, long time, and we're so lucky to have her. So here she is, and she's going to talk a little bit about what initiatives they have going on.
How do I work this? I just point it this way? I guess so. There I am. There I am. Okay. All right, Lake Winnipesaukee Association. This is our mission to protect the water quality and natural resources of the lake and the watershed. It's a big watershed, as Dawn just mentioned. And because it's so large, we've broken it up into sub-watersheds. So there are 10 sub-watersheds on Winnipesaukee, and we have been doing watershed management planning for 14 years, and we haven't done the entire lake. So, and a lot of that has to do with funding. But the first plan was completed in 2010, so that's now obsolete. And we'll have to try and get funding to do that. And that was for Meredith Bay, Sanders Bay, and Paugus Bay, which were done at one time. So now, these are the 3 remaining watersheds that need to have plans done. We're currently doing Wolfboro Bay, but we're really happy to say that we secured funding to complete these. So Center Harbor Bay, the Broads, and Alton Bay are the last areas. And that covers, let's see, Center Harbor Bay, called Center Harbor Bay, but very little is in Center Harbor. It's mainly Meredith and Moultonborough. The Broads is Guilford and Alton Bay has mostly Alton because the Merrymeeting River part of it's already been completed. So we just held the kickoff meetings for these 3 plans the week of May 20th. And so we will be starting on our identifying sources of pollution, doing water quality analysis, septic system, risk analysis, all the things, the shoreline survey, which I'm feeling is going to be a nightmare for this large area to do a shoreline survey. Might take all summer. I don't know. Anyone wants to help? See me if you got a boat. But we got funding from this through the congressional directed spending request process. So Senator Shaheen actually helped us secure this funding. So we're really grateful to her and excited to have a lake-wide comprehensive plan completed. So as I mentioned, we're currently working with the town of Wolfboro on the Wolfboro Bay Watershed Management Plan. That's going to be completed by the end of this year. They've already done the watershed survey, septic system risk analysis, shoreline survey, build out risk analysis, yeah. So we will be having a meeting with the advisory committee, a couple of meetings this summer to review the results of this stuff, and then for the advisory committee to help set that water quality goal that, like Julie mentioned in the plan for Wentworth, that's what you strive to achieve. You either want to maintain what you have for water quality or you want to improve it. In the watershed survey, this is an example of one of the mitigation sites. This actually came in as the top priority. So there will be engineering designs done for this site, as well as 2 other sites. But this is South Main Street, and this ends up, I believe, flowing, it's a problem, and going into Russ Pond. Hopefully in the future we can apply for some 319 funding to do mitigation for this. But we'll see. Like Julie says, everyone's competing for a limited amount of funding. We just wrapped up a study on Paugus Bay, and for those who might not be aware, Paugus Bay is the drinking water source for the city of Laconia. And that little mark there shows where the water intake pipe is, and the yellow arrow shows where a cyanobacteria bloom was last summer, which was there for probably 3 weeks, if not more, and it's a benthic cyanobacteria, so washes up on the shore. And according to the residents, it's been there for several summers. They just never reported it. So then we get a report and we get a picture. Paugus Bay, yeah. So we looked at 5 of the catchments that are closest to the intake pipe, so we didn't do an analysis of the whole area. But really, I don't think I have the map here. Paugus Bay has over 250 catch basins or outfalls that flow directly into that bay. No treatment, and it's a drinking water source. And it's steeply sloped on both sides. So very urbanized. There's a lot of issues. They're going to be needing highly engineered improvements that's beyond my capability. But there's also in P4, you see Long Bay and South Down. If you're familiar with those are very large residential developments. They have lawns straight to the shore. They have detention ponds that they don't have any buffers on, and they have a tremendous geese problem. So Lake Kanasaka, this is the bloom from last October, the end of October. Lake Kanasaka is on the right, and it flows under Route 25 and empties into Blackie Cove and Lake Winnipesaukee, which is on the left. So we happened to have somebody going up in a helicopter that day who saw this and took the pictures. Lake Kanasaka just had an alum treatment 2 weeks ago, maybe. So we are going out and sampling in Blackie Cove. UNH, DES are sampling in Lake Kanasaka. Lake Kanasaka Watershed Association has done a tremendous amount of work to address stormwater runoff on the land, but they just have a legacy of phosphorus in the sediments. So we also obtained a second congressional directed spending award through Senator Shaheen's office to do some mitigation work, some stormwater mitigation in the Lake Kanasaka watershed. So that will begin probably later this fall. We're also partnering with FB Environmental Associates, the Town of Meredith, and the Waukee-Wong Watershed Advisory Committee to assist with the cyanobacteria monitoring program on Lake Waukee-Wong. Lake Waukee-Wong is the drinking water source for the business community in Meredith. It's about 3,000 people, I think, are on their water system. They have had cyanobacteria blooms in the past, nothing recently, but this is, I guess, a pilot program where they've deployed a weather station, a sonde, a buoy, and they're getting continuous monitoring data from Lake Waukee-Wong near the intake pipe. And so if they're going out sampling monthly, and we're also collecting samples for cyanobacteria, whether there's a bloom or not, we're just analyzing it in-house. LWA is doing that, and then we're providing some training to the Waukee-Wong residents as well. We completed this study this winter. So Melvin River, it was a habitat assessment. Melvin River is in the Moultonborough Bay watershed, and Melvin River contributes the largest inflow into Melvin Bay. We had, anecdotal information from residents that you see large sediment coming in here. It is dammed, but we did this assessment to go upstream and see if we could find any real issues of where that erosion and sediment might be coming from and how to make improvements. So we actually have some further work being done right now by FB Environmental Associates. We do have this report on our website if anyone's interested. Okay, landscaping workshop. I already talked about it, but I'll put the plug here. And I think that kind of ends my talk. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat. Good information and keeping with our trend of keeping on time here. Most appreciated. So next up is from Russ Pond Association is Libby Peard. Libby is committed to preserving Russ Pond water quality for future generations. She worked in coordination with DES to complete a comprehensive lake study of Russ Pond in 2007. She serves as a member of Wolfboro Waters, and after decades as a summer person, Libby feels fortunate to call Wolfboro her year-round home.
Good morning. I feel as if I've been totally set up following Julie and Pat, but the good news is I only have 5 minutes, so I'll be quick, as I maybe do not inspire in the same ways. In concluding my remarks at last year's Water Summit, I spoke to the hope that I'd have good news to report about progress on the Russ Pond sort of water issues. And though the pace has seemed kind of glacial at times through the year, I am happy to be able to report today on some movement in the right direction. I assume most people know about Russ Pond, but just a few headlines. We're definitely in the category of a still healthy or oligotrophic lake, but there have definitely been changes through the years in terms of our metrics. Phosphorus and conductivity numbers are moving in the wrong direction. And I was going to say, until I heard this morning that we had a 2009 cyanobacteria bloom. We had not had any to date, but we definitely have an increase in algae and plant growth and noticeable changes to the bottom of the lake, well beyond the north end, which is our big trouble spot. So, with that in mind, I'll tell you just a bit about the north end. We have definitely seen excessive sediment loading through the years that has pretty much redefined the landscape at the north inlet of our lake. These photos show basically the same position at the north inlet during a progression of a decade when there was especially heavy loading. A sizable landmass right at the delta of the lake has obviously changed the experience for residents at that end, but it has also been responsible for compromising some aspects of water quality. The primary causes are sediment loads from upstream, land development, hydro modification, and related channel erosion due to greater stormwater runoff. So actually this provides a segue to some of the good news, though it's in this sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back category. We received 319 grant and town funding in early 2023 to pursue plans for reducing sediment loading as recommended in a tributary hydrology evaluation. But then came the July torrential rain event, which led to further devastation at the north end. As these photos show, our once meandering stream at the north inlet is now football field sized. And unfortunately, we had further problems with sediment deposit as the Beaver Dam, which is sort of shown what remains here, was breached in the storm. So post-storm plans for our stormwater management project had to be reconfigured. And we now have approval by DES to move forward with a slightly new design. And we hope this project is on track to be completed late summer if all goes well with permitting. So the 3 main elements involve construction of structural BMPs to reduce sediment loading, including drainage channel improvements, sediment traps, and check dams. Another element is a study to determine the costs and feasibility of dredging to restore conditions that have been so impaired by sediment deposition. And then finally, the plan calls for public outreach and education. And I just wish everyone living on Russ Pond was forced to come to this event, because we'd certainly be better off in terms of everyone recognizing that we all can make a difference by starting small and focusing on our own properties. So there are a few other areas for progress that speak to progress for Russ Pond. One is the prospect of better management of very concerning runoff and erosion along South Main Street, something that Pat touched on. This is absolutely been the Wolfboro Bay watershed study has been a great thing for Russ Pond, because it has put this concerning area on the map as a top priority for remediation. And so we're grateful to the Lake Winnipesaukee Association. A conceptual design is in progress, and we hope that by this time next year, we have been able to move forward possibly on the prospect of funding, and also that New Hampshire's Department of Transportation sees this as something they should be concerned about as well. And finally, there's progress in addressing runoff from a section of Camp School Road that borders the east side of Russ Pond. Years ago, DES had identified This dirt road is a major contributor when it came to nutrient-rich sediment running into the lake during major storms. This is really because I think in large part of a flawed road design with a very narrow shoreline buffer, but also certainly property development through the decades, coupled with major storms, has complicated things. But the good news and the progress is that we're moving forward, we hope, with a remediation project later this summer, early fall, assuming those who have pledged support will actually come through with that. So, I think the last, just in closing, I would like to point out that in advocating for Russ Pond and also serving on Wolfboro Waters, I've seen firsthand that progress really comes from working in community. And with that in mind, I'd like to thank Julie and the Wentworth Watershed Association, Pat, so many others who are inspiring those of us who don't know a lot but want to be helpful in making a difference to try to move forward on progress. So hope this time next year to be back with more good news. So thank you.
Thanks, Libby. Next up is Larry Gill from Mirror Lake. Larry retired from the Mass Department of Environmental Quality Engineering, Division of Water Pollution Control, a number of years ago and moved up to Mirror Lake. I actually ran across Larry in the mid-'80s when he was working for DEQE and was very pleased that he had moved up to this area and got to work with him again over on Mirror Lake a little bit. He's a longtime resident of Mirror Lake and very active in the association's Water Quality Committee.
Thank you, Dawn, for the nice introduction. I'm going to spare you a lot of time. I have no slides. Kathy Sharapa, who was our president of the MLPA, she came down with COVID, and it's just been just a little short of chaotic. We do have Dusty Davis, a longtime resident of Mirror Lake, and she was very instrumental in us getting a 319 grant, which we got in 2012, and we completed our management plan. So our management plan, we're in now process of updating our management plan. Mirror Lake, if you're not familiar with it, is on the border of Wolfboro and Tuftonboro off of Route 109. It's about roughly 321 acres. Watershed is about 1,500 acres, relatively small. We have one single stream perennial stream that feeds that comes from Abenaki Pond right by the ski area. Back up a little bit on our management plan. We've completed most of the things that it was done by a firm called Geosyntac, and we completed most of their recommendations for that, and they included an upgrading of Lang Pond Road. We did some improvements to our boat launch, which is off of Route 109. We've implemented BMPs. We've had extensive studies. We've been sampling Mirror Lake since the early 1990s. We have data going back to the 1970s. So we've got a very good database. Mirror Lake is relatively shallow. So, for the most part, it's less than 20 feet deep. We do have one deep spot that goes down to about 44 feet. That tends to go anoxic every single year and has been that way for a considerable period of time. We are looking to update our clean water, update our management plan, and we're doing that through the state's Clean Water Revolving Fund. This is partnered with the town of Tuftonboro. The Tuftonboro Board of Selectmen have been very, very gracious to us. We applied for the grant last year. We thought we were shoo-in. Didn't happen. So we're up for, again for this year. Applications are due in August of this year. Town of Tuftonboro has stepped up again and said, yes, we will help fund this. And I won't get into the details of how that all works, but we're looking forward to doing that. We're working with FB Environmental, as so many of the other associations are. They are working with us to develop that plan. We're probably going to be focusing on issues relative to shoreline development. We've done all of that in the past, but it needs to be updated. It's 10 years old. So there's certainly been some changes within the watershed. We've had 4 outbreaks of cyanobacteria. The first was in 2008. The last 3 have been in the last 4 years. Question: everybody had cyanobacteria outbreaks last year. We did not. Everybody assumed a lot of runoff, you're going to get it. We did not. We certainly had it in there. We were looking for it. Didn't show up. So that's curious as to what are the reasons why we didn't have that. That's a whole scientific area that we really want to actively look at and work with FB Environmental to try to see if we can figure out why that was the case. Don Kretschmer did a sediment analysis, extensive sediment analysis of the deep spot and other locations within the lake, so we have a good understanding of the ratios of iron and aluminum to the phosphorus. Phosphorus concentrations have generally stayed low in and around. We're right on the mesotrophic level, so we're 10 plus as far as epilumnium concentrations. At the deep, that's substantially different because it's anoxic, and those numbers are, they've had as 100 parts per billion in that area. We don't know a lot about the circulation within Mirror Lake. That's one of the other focuses that we hope to do with FBE to get a better sense of how water moves. We seem to be in an area where we're located where wind is a driving force for us. Relatively small lake, so if we get a strong southwest wind, we tend to measure our water levels at Lang Pond Road, where there's a couple of culverts there that has a geodetic, it's associated with the USGS database, so we can accurately measure water levels at that point. We don't have a good sense of how much flow is there, and that's something that we want to work on. What else? So there are some indications that we might be amenable to an alum treatment. We don't have the resources. We listened at the Lakes Congress, $500,000, that we can't even come close to that. So I don't know exactly how that's going to work, but we may have some potential because our deep water is relatively confined to a relatively small area, and there are maybe some advantages there for that, but we won't know until we get more information. And the last thing we want to do is do something that, one, is going to cost a lot of money and not get the results that we want. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Okay, so last but not least is Abigail Adams from Wentworth Waters. Dr. Adams is a retired physician who fell in love with the Lakes region 40 years ago. She became involved with Wentworth Waters in 2018. She's committed to using her science background and her energy to work to keep our lakes clean.
So I am Abby Adams, and I am a member of the Wentworth Waters Committee. And I guess I first want to say thank you again to Julie Brown and to the Wentworth Watershed Association for giving us yet another excellent water summit and an opportunity to be together. For those who don't know, I'll just remind you that Wentworth Waters is a town committee of volunteers that's appointed by the Board of Selectmen and reports to the Board of Selectmen, and that we collaborate with all the town watershed associations for a common goal, which is to continue to maintain excellent water quality for all our lakes and ponds. I'd like to just briefly review what we've accomplished this year and what our plans are for the next year. I'd say number one, we were pleased when the Board of Selectmen asked us to review the drainage plans for the two large construction projects in town, which were the Hunter's Market rebuild and the redesign and building of the public safety building. And we were able to make suggestions, which were taken, and I'm very happy to say that all of the water that leaves those properties will be filtered before it enters the lake, which is a new accomplishment. And I would just say we had input from all the lake associations on looking at those drainage plans. The second thing our Wolfboro Waters did with our citizen science lab and with the help of UNH was collect samples from all of our lakes and do PCR analysis to determine exactly what types of cyanobacteria we were finding. We're completing those analyses now. We've shared preliminary results with all of our lake associations about their own lakes, and we'll be continuing to do that. And then the last thing that we did was the help of, a lot of help from Emily Clark from Wentworth Watershed Association. We collected sediment samples from all of our local lakes, and the resulting analysis shows that the local sediments are an important source of phosphorus, feeding cyanobacteria and other biological growth. And we've all seen more biological growth on the floors of our lakes. We will be further studying the actual concentration and ratios of aluminum to phosphorus throughout the summer. And we'll be reporting that back. We also continue to put out an e-newsletter 3 times a year, maintain a Facebook page and a presence on the town website, and we participate in the Cyanobacteria Alert Program with the Wolfboro Town Dispatch and New Hampshire DES, and assist, along with Wentworth Watershed, obtaining samples when a suspicious sighting has been made. And then the last thing I want to say is for our next year, our priority is going to be to do some stream sampling. We've partnered again with Wentworth Watershed to fashion our stream sampling protocols along the lines of theirs, and we've had some generous help from Don Kretschmer and Julie Brown. And we'll be looking at stream sampling to see what the nutrient loading how it's measured quantitatively as it empties into Lake Winnipesaukee. Wentworth Watershed has been doing their tributary sampling for years. We've identified 4 streams, 2 from the Winter Harbor watershed study and 2 from the Wolfboro Bay watershed study that were identified as high priority. So we will be sampling the streams according to a protocol to be able to quantitate what the sediment loading is. And we also are going to look and further assess the locations and what is in the areas where benthic cyanobacteria is cited. That is the dark black mat that you see sometimes on the bottom of lakes, and it was pictured in Paugus Bay, and many people just ignore it. So we're going to study what's in it and how much toxins are available in it. So I just sum up to say again, we are a town committee of volunteers. We work with all the lake associations. I think we see a lot of progress. As they say, the wind's in our sails because there's a lot of interest because of cyanobacteria in cleaning up our lakes and keeping them clean. Come by the table and pick up a free bumper sticker and sign up for our newsletter. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Abby. So if we can have all the speakers come back up, and if you have questions, Julie has cards, or we can, and well, we have a few questions that we got before. All right. Julie, can you check the microphone there? Make sure. What we'll do is we'll pass that around.
Back.
As we go. Okay. Good. So I'm going to give you the first one, Julie. Since you have the microphone, you get the first question. So it starts with a statement. There are no young people here. Was there any outreach to Kingswood or local groups or any plans to get more youth involved and interested in water quality?
Did you see my daughter?
And Jack.
And Jack, my intern, who's been a volunteer. These two are actually two of the best volunteers our organization has and have been for years. So we do have young people volunteering for the organization, trying to get more. I happen to know the captain of the Kingswood environmental team, the Envirothon team. And she's been working with her class, FBLA, and throughout the schools to get more in. We work with the teachers at Kingswood. Trying to get kids to come in on a Saturday to learn is a challenging thing during the summer, but we do work actively with the community and we need to expand more. So as far as people within the watershed, I see a lot of shorefront property owners here, but we really need to be working throughout the watershed, and we are trying to reach those people. So bring your friends, talk to your friends who are not lakefront property owners about what they can do to make a difference.
Okay. So this isn't necessarily for everybody here, because not everybody is relevant, but I think Rust Pond, Wentworth Watershed, and Wolfboro, what are your organizations doing to coordinate with New Hampshire DOT on the South Main Street project to ensure that the water quality of runoff from the highway to our lakes is better than it is now?
I'll go first and pass over this way. We have been an active voice from the very beginning. I know I show up and members of the organization show up for every DOT plan meeting, filled out the surveys, and every time they have somebody there asking what needs to be done, we say water quality, water quality, water quality. You need to do something with your water, not us. So we'll just continue to be watchdogs. That's what we need to do, is make sure that we're holding them accountable for treating the water that's coming off of state roads. It's important. And I urge you all to do the same.
I don't have much to add, but I see this as sort of a campaign not to buy into things only happen on a 10-year cycle. I'm really hoping that we can be convincing that this is not a project that can wait, and that we will qualify for funding and I hope buy-in so that we can implement whatever plan comes out of this conceptual design phase.
I would just say, because that site's been identified in the watershed management plan, that will, I think, help with both DOT and DES in looking at it and addressing it. But we should and can bring DOT in now to start the conversation.
Right, and I guess maybe I'll add a little bit in that, this is our chance for a bite at the apple. Once the pipes and the road is there, the chance to retrofit it is gone for a period of time. Think about the last time South Main Street was updated. So now is the time to get it right and be active in the process. Okay, here's a question. I'm not sure who this goes to, but said, you asked us to report our septic upgrades or other mitigation improvements on our properties. From what date? Please clarify. And then it has 2012 as a question mark.
I'm guessing that might have come from my presentation with our watershed management plan, and my answer is I don't know yet. I'm not actively working with a contractor at this time. They still have to be awarded our contractor, but once that transpires, they'll give us guidelines, and I'll be blasting them out in the newsletter. But in general, we're looking for an update from what the status was of the septic system during last septic system survey, which would have been done in 2010 or 11, because the plan was complete in 2012. So for the Wentworth Watershed members of all the people who are in the watershed, which probably is all of you, 88% of Wolfboro, we're going to be looking for anybody to self-report. And if you don't self-report, we are probably going to assume that your septic systems are failing. So.
Okay. Anyone else comment on that? Okay, so this is a little bit more of a statement, but we're going to go with it anyway. Isn't it everyone's responsibility to infiltrate their water on their own property, thereby keeping excessive rains on your own land?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Great.
You want to agree? Nobody else wants to take the microphone.
Agreed. I'm president of the Merrill Lake Estates Road Association, and we are battling with this. And it's, from my perspective as the president of the association, it's a shared responsibility. Some property owners say, okay, I don't want you on my property. I want you to take care of the runoff that is on my property. Other one says, I don't want you touching my property at all because it's my land. There's a dynamic, in my opinion, between the two. We, as the road association, are responsible for the road and the drainage. If there is drainage on your property that is coming in and it's pooling on your property, that's your responsibility to take care of. If you're looking for a solution from the road association, to the extent that we can do that, we will try to do that. We have a situation where somebody wants us to pipe that drainage that's pooling on from his property onto somebody else's property. I don't know that that property owner that would receive that drainage, that also has a raised septic system, is going to be really eager to have more water in this situation. That there has to be a workable solution to that. If there is no response, it's not my problem, you have to solve it. That's going to rapidly become a court issue. We would want to avoid that, but from my perspective, being on both sides of the issue, it's a workable situation. And as property owners, we should be responsible for our property and what occurs on our property. To the extent that it becomes a problem that is beyond that property owners, then we can try to help. But we don't have magic solutions for some of this.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Okay, this one I'm going to give to Dave, since he hasn't had to speak in a while. Should I clear fallen trees and brush from the lake if they're not a hazard to navigation or use? I noticed, around, especially after the storms this winter, there's a lot of trees in the lake and so forth.
I would say the answer is no. I mean, I think those provide great habitat and stability to the lake, to the shorefront of the lake. So I'd say if it's not a hazard to navigation, I think it should stay right where it is.
Yeah, I think that's.
Was that the question? Did I answer?
That is, you did answer the question,
Okay.
and I think that's right. I mean, the trees have been falling in lakes for eons before we were here, and it turns out they're really, really good for fish and aquatic life habitat.
And anecdotally, I don't have an underwater chainsaw.
Good. Okay. I'm not sure who gets this one, but probably everybody has an opinion on it. Can you speak about the pros and cons of lake drawdowns conducted by the state? I will say this isn't Dave's responsibility, but he gets to answer it anyway.
I do not work for the Dam Bureau, but that's the group at DES that manages the drawdowns. The drawdowns are typically done to manage snowfall runoff in the springtime. So that's the reason that they're doing most of the drawdowns. Sometimes they're done on a limited extent to allow people to access waterfront property to do work. But that's kind of why they do that. They do. It is becoming ever more challenging to manage hydrology, as you can imagine, with the extreme precipitation events that we have. And it's the Bureau, the Dam Bureau, is being inundated with phone calls, in particular with the water level management on Winnipesaukee, because it is really challenging. They do have a relatively sophisticated system for tracking things, and they do the best they can. Personally, I think drawdowns just for the sake of doing a drawdown, they don't really serve much purpose. If it is to manage water level in the springtime, and there's some hydrologic model that supports that, then it seems reasonable. But drawdowns, obviously can put the recreational season at risk. They, have ecological impacts, storm, ice damage. They were an accepted way to manage invasive species for a long time. The idea is to draw down the water so that the sediment is exposed, and then that freezes, and then maybe the invasive aquatic plants don't come back. But we know there's a seed bank in the sediment that isn't destroyed through the drawdown. So, is anybody else?
No?
We get calls all the time, and it's a very challenging issue because half of the folks want it one way, half the folks want it the other. It's very divisive in the community. And I'm just going to say out loud to this group, please share with your neighbors. We are well aware of the fact that Lake Wentworth is still low, courtesy of the Mass Landing construction project and the big drawdown this year. It's the big draw. It's once every 5 years they draw down extensively. And I don't have a faucet to fill the lake. I can't fill it. The town's doing the best they can. The dam is currently just opened with a trickle for the Smith River to stay wet. But as Don, I think, told me at one point, an inch of rain in the watershed equates to about, it could equate to as much as a foot of water in the lake. So hopefully next week, if you do a rain dance, maybe we'll get some rain and the lake levels will come up.
Right, and that rule of thumb is courtesy of Alan Stevens, who I think many of you probably remember. Alan was the dam keeper for a long time, and that's what he always said. It's a little less than that when there's trees to uptake the water, but a little rain will go a long ways towards filling up the lake, and it will fill up fairly rapidly if we get some rain. We got to watch what we wish for. We don't want the rain like last year, but. Okay, I'm going to do one more, and this one is to anybody, and this is something that's near and dear to most lakefront owners. How can we keep geese off of the lawn areas near the lake?
Please, 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 shoreline buffers. You must plant native plants, blueberries, anything along your shoreline. If they think there's a coyote or something that's a predator behind the bush, they will not come ashore. So the more vegetation you have, the less geese you will have.
Anyone else have silver bullets? Right, and the less lawn area. If you don't have lawn area, and they love to walk right out of the water onto a lawn area. If you don't have lawn area, they won't come. So that's kind of the thing. And somebody was asking me during the break about beach closures for coliform, and geese are certainly a big source of coliform. Along with the nutrients that geese they also offer bacteria, and so anything we can do to discourage luxury use is a good thing. Skip.
I have two closing comments.
All right.
First of all, the silver bullet apparently for winning geese with turf is grape Kool-Aid. Mixed with a fairly strong solution, sprayed onto the grass. They hate the taste.
Yeah. No, I have heard that as well.
And then secondly, I didn't ask the question And I finally have found an outstanding benefit that the drawdown brings everyone who votes on Lake Wentworth. The new Google Earth images were taken this fall after the drawdown. So anything you see on that, you can hit with a vote.
I like that. That's great. Okay, well, I think with that, if we have no more questions, I want to. Oh, one more question here.
We've been hearing a lot about cyanobacteria. Is this newer than some of the other problems that have been introduced to the lakes in the area? And if so, I may have missed this in one of the previous presentations, but what is the basic cause of cyanobacteria?
Yeah, so I'll start the answer and then somebody else can fill in. I mean, cyanobacteria are not new. They've been around for billions of years. They're one of the earliest life forms. They've been in our lakes all along at low concentrations. What happens is, you just have, a very small population of cyanobacteria, but when they're fed nutrients and in, warmer waters, they have a tendency to explode. And that's, I think Dave had a really good slide on that. And the reality is that our lakes are getting warmer, and we have more and more nutrients related to more and more development around the lakes. And those two things are fueling the cyanobacteria. Okay. I'd like to thank Axel, our eye in the sky up there. You can... Another young person who's here. And I'd like to thank our sponsors for this, the Wolfboro Fund, Wentworth Waters Committee, Ann Blodgett and Phil Holberton, Linda and Rick Krutoff, Baldwin Excavation, Richard Energy, Governor's Landing Association, Joan and Ray Green, Lake Winnipesaukee Association, Mirror Lake Protective Association, Morgan Stanley, Russ Pond Association, the Wolfboro Fund, New Hampshire Charitable, and the town of Wolfboro and Morgan Stanley. And then it's the Granite State Group at Morgan Stanley. Anyway, thanks so much for the sponsors, which really helped make this happen. Thanks so much for coming out, and thanks to all the speakers. And maybe you can catch some of them if you have like a burning question that occurs to you in the next couple minutes before they get out to their car. And chase them down.
Take a sandwich or a muffin with you on your way out, and thank you for being here.
You sure can.